Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be digging into another complex topic.
Yeah, and today it's one that's been pretty hard to ignore lately. The military capabilities of Israel and Iran.
Mhm.
We're going to focus specifically on what our sources are telling us about their aerial power. So, their air forces, missile programs, drones, that whole picture.
It's definitely a timely comparison, especially with, well, everything that's been happening. The recent tensions and exchanges really bring it into focus.
Absolutely. And understanding how they approach air power, their strengths, their weaknesses, it's pretty key to understanding the bigger strategic landscape, I think.
Definitely.
So to guide us, we've pulled from several places. We've got AP News articles, some analysis from the Washington Institute, National Security Journal reports, and even some related online discussions to get different angles.
And our mission really is to unpack all that for you. We want to highlight the key insights and, importantly, understand the really striking differences in how these two countries approach air power and defense.
Right. Big differences. So let's get straight into it. Let's start with Iran. What do the sources say about their overall military setup and specifically the state of their traditional air force?
Okay, so the first thing the sources point out is Iran's military structure. It's large, but it's quite distinctively divided. You've got the regular armed forces, the Artesh,
Okay.
and then you have the Paramilitary Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, which is, well, very powerful.
And the IRGC isn't just like another branch, right? It's more complex.
Exactly. It's a major power center in its own right. It includes things like the elite Quds Force, their Strategic Missile Command, even their cyber forces. It's quite embedded in the state structure.
Gotcha. And the numbers, how big are we talking?
Pretty substantial. The regular Artesh is around 600,000 personnel, and the IRGC adds about another 200,000. So together, you're looking at a very large force on paper.
Okay, quite large. Now, zooming in on the Air Force, the IRIAF, what's the reality there according to the sources?
Well, the picture painted is pretty stark, actually. Across the board, it's described as aging, seriously depleted, and really feeling the bite of decades of sanctions.
Sanctions starved, I think I read somewhere.
That's the term, yeah. One analyst memorably called it a museum of old fighters.
A museum? Wow, that paints a picture. What kind of planes are actually in this museum?
They're still flying aircraft acquired before the 1979 revolution. So U.S.-made planes like F-4 Phantoms, F-5 Tigers, even some F-14 Tomcats, believe it or not.
F-14s?
Still, apparently so. And alongside those, they've got older Russian and Soviet models like MiG-29s and Su-22s. It's a real mix of vintage hardware.
And keeping those flying must be a nightmare with sanctions, spares, maintenance.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge point in those sources. It's not just inconvenient. It's a fundamental problem. Getting spare parts officially is often impossible. Maintenance is incredibly difficult.
Which impacts readiness, I assume,
Yeah.
and safety.
Directly. Readiness struggles are mentioned, and tragically, so are accidents. One source specifically noted a MiG-29 crash that resulted in a fatality. It highlights the real risks involved in operating such an old, poorly supported fleet.
So they haven't really managed to build up their own modern aircraft industry to compensate.
They've tried. Iran does have an aviation industry, and they do overhaul existing planes. But the analysts are pretty clear. They haven't successfully developed or manufactured their own modern, viable fighter jet.
Why not? What are the big hurdles?
It's incredibly complex stuff. Jet engines, advanced metallurgy for the airframes, avionics. These are huge technological challenges, made even harder by sanctions restricting access to know-how and components. So for major upgrades, they really have to look abroad.
Which brings us to those Russian Su-35s they reportedly acquired, 24 of them. Does that change things much?
It's a step up, for sure. The Su-35 is a capable jet. But the sources are quite cautious here. Analysts tend to see it as a drop in the bucket, essentially.
It's a drop.
Well, compared to the size and, crucially, the technological level of Israel's Air Force, 24 planes don't fundamentally shift the balance. It's an improvement for Iran, yes, but not a game changer in the regional context.
And there's another layer here, isn't there? The funding within Iran's military seems skewed away from the regular Air Force.
That's another really critical point the sources emphasize. It shows Iran's priorities. The regular Artesh, including the Air Force, gets a much smaller slice of the budget compared to the IRGC.
How much smaller are we talking?
One source gave a striking figure for a recent budget year. Only about $5.3 million specifically earmarked just for refurbishing the entire Artesh air fleet.
5.3 million For a whole Air Force's refurbishment, that sounds incredibly low.
It really does. It starkly underlines the lack of investment in conventional air power compared to other areas, especially the IRGC's priorities. It's almost a side note, but one source mentioned this sort of historical attachment some in the Artesh Air Force had to those old American planes, even long after they became so hard to maintain.
Interesting. So, okay, if the conventional Air Force is struggling like this, where is Iran focusing its efforts and resources when it comes to aerial power?
This is where the strategy shifts, and you hear the term asymmetrical capabilities a lot. Because competing head-on with modern air forces is so difficult for them, the cost, the tech, the sanctions.
Right. Building a modern fighter is insanely complex. Engines, materials.
Exactly. Metallurgy, advanced avionics, stealth, it's all incredibly challenging. So, unable to compete there, Iran has pivoted. They've focused on developing different kinds of aerial threats where the barriers to entry are lower.
Asymmetrical meaning they fight differently, not plane on plane.
Precisely. Using their strengths against an opponent's potential weaknesses, often with less expensive or complex tech. For Iran, this means a really heavy investment in ballistic missiles and drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs.
Why missiles and drones specifically?
Several reasons come through in the sources. First, cost and relative simplicity, especially some drones like the Shahed 131 or 136 kamikaze types. Estimates put their cost around maybe $20,000 each.
$20,000 compared to millions for a jet fighter.
Exactly. Huge difference. Second, there's history. The Iran-Iraq War, where Iranian cities suffered heavily from missile attacks, left a deep scar and a strong belief in needing their own powerful missile force.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And third, they've gotten quite good at developing this stuff. They even claim successes like reverse engineering that captured U.S. RQ-170 Sentinel drone into their own designs, like the Shahed Sega.
And how does this missile and drone focus fit into their overall military thinking, their doctrine?
The sources talk about an offensive defense or forward defense strategy. The idea is to use these standoff weapons, missiles, and drones to hit threats or adversaries before they reach Iran itself, projecting power outwards.
And we've definitely seen them use these systems.
Oh yes, the sources list plenty of examples, targeting U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, responding to events like the Kerman bombing by firing missiles into Iraq and Pakistan.
And of course, that huge attack on Israel back in April.
That was the big one. Unprecedented scale. Sources say over 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 120 ballistic missiles, all launched in one go.
A massive barrage.
It really was. Now, the sources are also clear that Israel and its partners intercepted the vast majority of those. But the attack itself demonstrated Iran's capacity to produce and launch these weapons in very large numbers.
And it's not just Iran using them directly, is it? A huge part of their strategy seems to be giving these weapons to proxy groups.
Yeah, absolutely central. The sources really hammer this point. Iran leverages proxies across the region to project power, exert influence, maybe create plausible deniability. They provide the tech, the funding, the training.
So groups like
Hezbollah. In Lebanon, their leader has openly said their money comes from Iran. The Houthis in Yemen, various militias in Iraq and Syria, Hamas in Gaza.
And those groups have been very active recently, using drones and missiles.
Extremely active, especially since late 2023. The sources document widespread attacks. Houthi drones and missiles targeting ships in the Red Sea. Over 150 attacks by some counts on U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria by Iran-backed militias.
Wow, 150 plus APTET.
Yeah. And it's not just about using Iranian weapons. Some proxies, like the Houthis, with their versions of the Ababil drone, are apparently now manufacturing them based on Iranian designs. The tech transfer is real.
And this proliferation extends beyond the Middle East too, right? Russia and Ukraine.
Yes, that's another key point. Providing Shahed drones, Mohajer drones to Russia for use in Ukraine. The sources frame this as part of Iran's larger geopolitical game, undermining Washington, building alliances, boosting its own standing.
Okay, so that's Iran, aging conventional air force, but a major focus on asymmetrical power through missiles, drones, and proxies. Let's flip the coin. What do the sources tell us about Israel's military capabilities, especially in the air?
It's a very different picture. Israel's much smaller, population-wise and geographically, but its military is extremely capable, technologically advanced. About 170,000 active duty, maybe 400,000 reservists.
And often described as battle-hardened?
Yes, that comes up a lot. Constant engagement in regional conflicts means their forces have a lot of operational experience, but the real emphasis is on technology.
especially the Air Force.
Definitely. The Israeli Air Force, the IAF, is seen as the crown jewel. It's technologically far superior to Iran's. They operate some of the most advanced aircraft available, critically, including the F-35I Adir.
That's their version of the F-35 stealth fighter.
Exactly. A fifth-generation stealth aircraft. That's a whole different league compared to Iran's F-4s and MiG-29s.
So how does Israel counter Iran's missiles and drones, that asymmetrical threat we talked about?
That's where their missile defense system is crucial. It's multi-layered, developed over years, with significant U.S. help and funding.
Multi-layered, meaning different systems for different threats.
Right. Systems like Iron Dome for shorter-range rockets and mortars, David's Sling for medium-range threats, and Arrow for longer-range ballistic missiles. The idea is to detect incoming fire early,
Okay.
assess its trajectory as it heading for a populated area or a key site, and then launch the right interceptor to take it out.
And this system got a major real-world test during that big Iranian attack in April. How did it do?
Extremely well, according to all the sources. It intercepted the vast majority drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. Israeli officials always add the caveat that no system is 100% foolproof, but its performance was widely seen as a major success and validation.
So Israel leans heavily on tech and conventional power, but the sources mention other aspects too.
Yeah, it's not just about hardware. Their approach involves robust conventional forces, yes, but also what sources term subterfuge or covert operations to degrade enemy capabilities preemptively.
And there were mentions that Israel had already acted against Iran's capabilities before the recent escalation.
Correct. Some sources suggest Israel had already taken steps to weaken Iran's proxies, like Hamas and Hezbollah, through ongoing operations, and had also conducted strikes specifically targeting Iranian air defense systems in places like Syria.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What's the core contrast the sources highlight between Iranian and Israeli aerial military power?
It really boils down to this. Iran has numbers, a large personnel base, but faces a huge technological gap, particularly in conventional air power, largely due to sanctions. Israel is smaller, but possesses a technologically superior, well-equipped military with a decisive edge in the air and sophisticated defenses.
And that disparity is why Iran pivoted so hard to those asymmetrical capabilities.
Exactly. They recognized they couldn't compete symmetrically in the air, the cost, the complexity, the sanctions.
Yeah.
It made building a modern air force practically impossible.
So they focused where they could compete or at least pose a threat. Missiles, drones, proxies.
Right. Ballistic missiles give them that standoff strike option. They could threaten bases, cities, infrastructure from afar. Sources suggest this is seen as a relatively cost-effective way to deter potential attackers, hold valuable targets at risk.
And the drones.
Drones offer cheaper options for strikes, swarming attacks, surveillance. But, and this is important, they aren't a substitute for advanced fighter jets when it comes to controlling airspace, delivering heavy payloads reliably, or surviving in contested environments.
What about Iran's own air defenses? Can they protect against an advanced air force like Israel's?
They've invested in air defense. It's described as robust in places, but not impenetrable. And critically, it doesn't make up for the lack of modern fighter aircraft for air superiority planes designed to fight and win against other fighters.
And they lack things like AWACS, too, airborne warning systems.
Yes, that's a major gap mentioned. AWACS are like flying command posts with powerful radar. They see threats much farther out and coordinate the air battle. Without them, your situational awareness is severely limited against an enemy who does have them, like Israel.
So Israel's tech advantage really cuts both ways, better offense in the air and better defense against Iran's main threats.
That's the picture presented. Israel is better positioned for conventional air combat and has proven defenses against missile and drone attacks, although, again, no defense is perfect, especially against saturation attacks.
And it remains very hard for Iran to just buy its way out of this conventional gap.
Extremely hard. Sanctions are the biggest obstacle, and even potential sellers like Russia seem reluctant to provide their absolute top-tier offensive jets, likely balancing sales to Iran with their relationships with other regional powers, Saudis, Emiratis, maybe even coordinating tacitly with Israel sometimes.
There was also that point made in some sources, wasn't there, that just having fancy equipment doesn't guarantee success. The Saudi experience in Yemen was mentioned.
That's a fair point. Military success needs more than just gear training, doctrine, logistics, morale, strategy, all matter hugely. But in the specific realm of air-to-air combat technology and advanced integrated air defense, the sources consistently show Israel with a significant advantage right now.
So there you have it. A look at how these two regional powers have taken such different paths in developing their aerial military capabilities, shaped by sanctions, resources, technology, and strategy.
And the key takeaway from the sources seems pretty clear. Iran, hampered conventionally, leans heavily on asymmetric tools, missiles, drones, proxies. Israel leverages its technological superiority, especially in air power and missile defense.
It's a fascinating and frankly pretty tense strategic situation. Well, that brings us near the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us and exploring this with us.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in.
We really appreciate you spending your time with us. And hey, if you found this valuable or interesting, please do take a second to like, share, or leave a comment. It genuinely helps us keep making these deep dives for you.
It really does. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering how fast drone and missile tech is evolving, people are talking about AI, autonomy, swarming tactics. How might Iran's asymmetrical approach continue to challenge traditional air power and defense concepts in the years ahead? Definitely something to keep an eye on.